Good evening and welcome to the show Earth to the Other Side. My name is John Glasspool. Apologies for the sunglasses. I'm actually having some sensitivity issues to the video lights, so hopefully you can just put up with it. So tonight I welcome my guest Julie Northway, who's had two NDEs, one in 2007 and the other in 2009. Julie, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just put it in your corner and let you tell your tale, and then if there's any questions afterwards, we'll do the questions at the end, if that sounds good to you.
Sure. So I've had two near-death experiences where I was actually gone. One was very quick, and I don't like to use time words when I talk about them because, like, time really sort of disappeared for both of them. It wasn't when I say quick, it felt like forever, but it was different than the long one. The long one, I was physically dead longer, and the quick one, I was physically dead for a shorter amount of time. So the short one, I'll just mention first. That actually it happened after the long one. It happened in 2009 when I had my son, and I was getting a C-section. I had a reaction to the anesthesia that they use for a spinal for a C-section, and my heart stopped. So I was sitting up when they administered the spinal, and then I apparently fell over. And what I saw was sort of chaos in the room and a doctor getting on top of me and compressing my chest. And that's what happened. And I had bruises on my chest when I did come to. But it reminded me, and the sort of the impression I got was like Russian dancing bears, like the chaos of bears dancing around me, sort of a thing. But I was watching it all happen, and it was almost like the doctors were the bears and they were dancing around me and they were trying to bring me back. And it was all pretty fast. And it felt like a long time, like I was watching a performance. But then I came to, and it was just like, I actually felt pretty good after. So, I mean, my chest hurt and there was pain, but it was in a good mood. So I don't know. And that's all that really happened with the second short experience. The first experience I had was in 2007, and it was related to pregnancy as well. I don't know to this day why it happened. There's lots of questions that I've asked that I haven't gotten answers to from doctors, but essentially I got sepsis in my uterus, and that was transmitted to my baby. It was about the second trimester. And the sepsis spread into my blood and my spine and my lungs, and I went into septic shock. When I was in the ER, I was laying there dying, and no one really understood what was wrong with me. And there was a doctor there from somewhere in Africa, and he looked at me and immediately knew, because apparently it's a common occurrence wherever he was from in Africa. And he said, she's septic. She needs to go to OR now to get the baby out. And so they sent me to the OR. I remember screaming, but I couldn't have been screaming because my lungs were completely filled with fluid at that point. I wasn't able to make any noises. But I think it started when I was screaming. Like, I think that was the beginning of my NDE. I was screaming, and then I saw doctors again from somewhere else move me from one table to another table, and then I blacked out. And next thing I knew, I came to, and I was somewhere else, and that was sort of what I think of as closer to being dead or dead. I don't know. But basically, I was in sort of a room, but it was an open room. There was no ceiling. And in the center of the room, there was something in between a table and a well. It was circular. And there was two women in the room. One was clearly my grandmother, who died in the 80s. And in a room. There's a round table that looks like a well, and my grandma is there, and I know my grandma. And there's another woman there who is, I don't know. I get the impression that she's connected to me somehow. Maybe she was another grandmother, like that I never met, a great grandmother, an ancestor. I don't know. When I described this to the doctor, and because I was very confused when I came to eventually, I described her as Rosie the Riveter, like very strong, broad shouldered, short haircut, like very that. And she just represented like strength or something to me. She was holding my baby, and she was holding my baby in a blanket that my grandma used to use on her bed. And it wasn't like a fancy hand quilted thing or anything. It was like one of those cheap blankets that people used to have in the 80s. And it was some sort of microfiber thing. I don't know what they were made of, but my baby was wrapped in this blanket, and they didn't say anything to me, but there was communication happening. And basically they were holding my baby, and I just got the impression that like, we're going to love this baby for you. You keep loving her, but we are going to be here with her every day. And that was comforting, but I wasn't ready to accept it. And I just stayed. Like, I wouldn't go. Um, I wanted to be with my baby. And I told them that. And it was sort of like just pure instinct. It was like I was a complete, any animal inside of me, that's what I was. I was needing to be with my baby. If I had to be dead to be with my baby, so be it. And I wasn't going to go back, and I was going to stay there. If I couldn't go wherever the next step was, that's fine. I'll stay right here forever. But I needed to be with the baby. And this was like, again, it was a long time. So I was able to stay there with them for what felt like a long time. I wasn't able to hold her. They held her. They comforted me, and it was really like being surrounded by comfort and by love from them. We sort of just communicated love, and that was really like the main conversation, was just this sort of waves of love. And yeah, I don't know, I didn't see anything else there. I didn't feel anything. Well, I felt like maybe other energies and things. I don't know, I didn't see anything, but it was just them and my baby. And eventually, after what felt like forever, I was made to leave. A man came into the room, and he wasn't threatening or anything. He didn't seem angry or anything like that, but he was wearing a long coat. His face wasn't really there. Like, his features were sort of in a shadow. And I felt safe with him. I don't know what he was. I don't know if he was another ancestor or some sort of guide. But he took me out of that room, and he made me, it's like he turned off my instincts and made it so I could leave. I'm going to let my dog in now. So sorry.
No worries.
So he came, he sort of turned off my instinct, made it so I was able to sort of back out of that room. And then I don't know what happened. It was sort of like I blacked out again. And when I came to, I was in a different place, and it was structures. And what I got from him, and again, no words were exchanged, it was all just like waves. And it was that I sort of experienced like every connection that I ever made in my life, any human any animal, any whether it's bumping into someone on the street or having a relationship with somebody, it was all the same. Like it was nothing else mattered. Like it was sort of that flash of your life thing that people describe, but it wasn't anything that I did. It was just the connections I made to other people. So if I was nasty to somebody, it sort of created a structure. Some sort of looked more like buildings, some looked more like bridges, some looked like towers. But if I was nasty to someone, the structure looked weak and crumbling and rotting, almost like glowing Legos. And if it was a strong connection, it was beautiful and radiant and sort of glowed like this otherworldly blue color, which was everywhere. It was in the well room too. It was like just this sort of radiation of color. And these structures that were formed from my experiences, if it was a good experience, if I had positive experiences with these people, it would be this beautiful structure, whatever shape it was. If it was a negative experience, if I had been nasty or like bumped someone on the street and never thought of them again, it was like a crumbling, sort of like hollowed out, chewed up Legos, sort of black and brown. And basically, we were traveling through these structures, the good ones and the bad ones, seeing the different people that I've touched in my life and who have touched me. And eventually we came through the structures and we got to a huge tree, bigger than any of the structures that I had made. And it was, you could see it growing, you could see it moving, it was like breathing. And as it was moving up, and the branches were breaking down. The branches would fall into the roots, grow and tangle sort of back into the roots, and go back up into the tree. And I basically just approached the tree, and as I was approaching it, the guy that had led me there sort of faded away or wasn't in my peripheral anymore. And then I was in the hospital room, and the doctor was telling me that they almost lost me. So that was, I mean, that was it in a nutshell. So
That's amazing. First of all, my sympathies for the loss of your baby. That's wow. I don't even know
thank
if
you.
we'll get over
Yeah.
that.
I've, the whole thing was obviously super traumatic. And I'm still dealing with
Mm.
PTSD to this day from not from the actual death experience, but from losing my baby, what happened before and what happened after. So the the experience on the other side is like the comforting piece of my trauma.
Yeah.
And sort of when I'm in therapy and things like that, that's sort of where I go to feel better about everything that happened.
And in the first experience, the longer one, did you at any point see your body?
Yes.
You did.
Because I saw them lifting my body from one table to the other table.
Okay.
So I was sort of screaming, and then I was looking down at my body, and the doctors were like lifting me to the, I don't know, maybe like a metal table. So
Right.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were transferring you from one table to another.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
And then at that point you blacked out and
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I woke up, but in the room at the well.
Yeah. And so, like, what did everything look like? Let's just talk about the second experience, the first one, since it was your longer, more
Yeah.
detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
So
you described the structures, and that's very interesting, and I want to get to that. But prior to that section, what were things looking like in terms of your surroundings, your environment?
so it was very like almost like a cave, but with an opening at the top, and you can sort of see the stars. But it was colorful. It wasn't like a dark stone cave. It was the main source of light was from this well, and it was sort of my grandma and this other woman were standing around it, and from the well, light was pouring out. So, like, if you looked down in the well, it was just this blue color, like, and again, I think I said in when I wrote to you, it wasn't really blue. It was a color that I have never seen before, but it sort of radiated almost like a blue sensation. And the blue was coming out of the well and reflecting on the cave like structure around it. So, very universe, very like colors of the stars, if you want to say that. So, like if you're looking at a enhanced picture of the Milky Way, sort of a thing, it was similar to that in the sky and the reflection of the light on the walls.
Did it feel like more or less, more realistic to you? Like that was realer than the
Yeah,
experience here?
it was, yeah, it definitely felt like I was waking up from being asleep. So I was in a dream in my life, and now I was waking up and this was reality. And it was like I could feel everything. Sort of like when you're actually dreaming a very realistic dream and you wake up, and the thing that makes you realize you were in a dream is you can sort of like feel the ends of your fingers, and I don't know, maybe your foot fell asleep or something, but it was sort of like that, except you're feeling like sort of waves of emotion and communication and love. You're feeling things that you feel like you should have been feeling all along, but you were in a dream,
Right.
so you weren't feeling them.
Yeah. So, like in a dream, though, usually, I don't know, I guess in lucid dreams, it sort of depends. I think sometimes even in lucid dreams, things seem more real.
Right.
But in regular dreams that feel realistic, I find
Mhm.
that, so that's a dream and it feels realistic as does, as Earth, as your earthly,
Mhm.
your life. And then so when you
Yes.
wake up from that, does it still feel like this is a dream?
Yeah. I actually have a lot of trouble in life now. Um, Grasping reality, if that makes sense. The other thing I have trouble with is time and concepts since that happened. Like during my work day, I do something, that everyone else does. Like I do office type work. I need to listen to music to keep track of time, or else I don't know like what order everything's in. Like, it's really, really hard to explain. And it's everything feels like I'm numb, or I am remembering things bef- in the future and in the past at the same time. It's really hard to explain. I'm never right now experiencing this second, and that's frustrating and hard. And doing things that are mundane that have to happen in a certain order um, is difficult, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I could see how that's very frustrating.
Yeah.
For sure.
Before this all happened to me, I was very studious and driven. Very like I wanted to sort of go all the way with my career, and I was traveling 80% of the time, and um, going for multiple degrees and things like that. After this happened, all of that seemed not important at all anymore. Um, I still have that in me, and I still like with work and things like that. It's like the drive is still there, but then the numbness of not feeling like I'm real makes it very difficult to follow through. And less important, which it's like I want to do it, but it's also not important. And it also, I don't know. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it's a different way than I used to view things in the world. So
For sure. I'm sure a lot of things in terms of your view and perception of, your life now have changed since your experience, right?
I'm still me. There's still things that make me me, and that hasn't changed, but it's just sort of how the world moves around me that feels like it's changed. Um, and me getting a grip of that world moving around me has become more difficult.
Yeah, understandably. And at which point did did you have that realization at some point? Oh, I'm dead. Okay, I died. I must have died. And did you remember what had happened?
I didn't remember what happened. I don't even know. I don't even know if I ever thought about that before. Um, when I was there, the one driving thing in me was they're going to take my baby, they're going to kill my baby. And that was such a strong um instinct that it sort of overtook any concern of me being actually dead. So, yeah, I think I knew what was happening, especially because my grandma was there and she was obviously dead. But I didn't care at all because I was really concerned that first, the doctor was going to take my baby. Second, that my baby was going to be left in this one world and I was going to be taken to another. Um, and that was really my baby being dead is the thing that I had to learn, not me. So that was the part that I was really focusing on.
At what point did you realize that your baby had died? Was it while you were
Um,
before the actual surgery took place, or?
Yeah, I think they told me before the surgery took place, but I didn't accept it. I was told they told me that. I didn't absorb it and didn't accept it and didn't believe it. So,
I'm not a
um,
doctor, but you might have been in shock too from.
absolutely. And I was so sick that like they could have told me anything, and I was upset, obviously. So when I came to, I knew immediately because I had just come from where I came from, and it was made to me very clearly made to me that I was leaving without her. So when I was back in the hospital bed, it was immediate. I knew she was. No one had to tell me anything. I knew she was gone. So
Did you feel like you had a knowing of the mysteries of our world while you were there?
no, not at all, actually, except for the whole connection thing. That was kind of like a download because it felt like lifetimes of memories, but it was only things that I interacted with. So it was people that I spoke to when I was 5 years old. It was people I spoke to yesterday. It was the doctors that I just was having interactions with. It was everybody. And that felt sort of like a download. Um, but again, it felt like we were going through every single creature that I had an interaction with ever. And that was sort of the important thing that he was trying to explain to me. Um,
So this is at the point where you were with the structures, right? And you saw these
yes,
vibrations,
with the
frequencies.
guy that had the long coat on. Yeah. So the only information that my grandma and the other woman gave me was love. That was it. And that was like in and of itself enough communication. And that was in and of itself enough like that was the download. And I didn't really need to have any questions answered because I knew I was loved and I knew that I loved them and I loved my baby, and that was all enough. And there was no sort of need to go further than that.
Mhm.
I did remember questioning in myself, like, is there more than what's here? Like, is there more than this? And I remember getting the impression of my grandma being like, I don't really know. So like so yeah, and then it sort of just dropped. But again, I didn't it wasn't really the focus of what was happening, so I didn't pry and I didn't really I was yeah, it was not it was not something that I was really driven to ask at the moment.
Right. And while you were there, did you sense any presence, like a source of godlike presence?
Not really, only the love from the people there and even the people here, right? So the love of the connections that I've made. So I mean, if you want to think of God in as a whole of people that are connected, then yes, because I felt all the love that sort of was built by existing in life. Um, but there wasn't like singular godlike source of anything, at least that didn't present itself to me. So but yes, definitely there was a lot of love. Definitely there was a lot of power from connections, both on the other side and that I made in my life. So it was like sort of like a quilt of everything that generations upon generations of people created by living.
How do you differentiate between, souls or people that you had affected? Like, how did you know who was who, or did you not, or did it not matter?
I just knew. So I wouldn't, it's like, if you had brought up those people to me before, I wouldn't have known them necessarily, not all of them. But when each sort of memory was being presented to me, I just knew who it was. I didn't have to be explained. I didn't have to, it was something that I did. And it was something that I had experienced. Maybe I've forgotten about it. Maybe it happened so early on that I don't remember it, or it's so mundane that I didn't remember it. But when I was presented with it, I just would know who that was. And actually, after I had recovered quite a bit, I had this super internal drive to reconnect with people in my life. And I went on missions searching people out on social media, which wasn't really a lot back then. Um, but I think I used a little bit of MySpace and a little bit of Facebook and a little bit of
MySpace. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit
Blast
of
from the
all of
past.
that. Yeah. So and I didn't find everybody, but I think I dug back like as far back like kindergarten even. So just trying to find people that I had connected with in life, whether they were, classmates or teachers or cousins that I never talked to because they're like I saw them one time in my life. But anyone who I had a name for, I went back and I searched for. And some of them I reconnected with, and some of them I'm actually really close to this day. So it was definitely something when I finally did get home from the hospital, I was on a PIC line for about 6 months. So I had a lot of time to do that kind of digging. So I took advantage of it.
Some of these people that you interacted
Yeah.
with and you learned the effects of your behavior, and for some of the more negative ones that you kind of want to reconnect with and rekindle, do you remember any of those? And can you go back to those people and say, listen, I know it sounds crazy, but
Yeah.
I had a near-death experience, and I realized in the life review that me doing this or saying this really affected you, and I'm sorry. I mean, is that a thing?
Yeah, no, that was literally what I did. And I was always a little odd, so I don't think anyone was really off. Everyone was okay and sort of understood, oh, that's Julie. She's being weird again. But yeah, so I basically I reached out to people. I sort of explained like, hey, I just went through something in my life and it was sort of really eye-opening and I thought of you and I just wanted to reach out to let you know, I'm thinking of you or I'm sorry or whatever it was. So and like I said, and it wasn't obviously everybody because that's impossible, but for those that I could have a name for, I reached out. It also, um, because I had MRSA like in my spine, in my brain, everywhere, I was struggling a little with face recognition. So it was actually really helpful to connect with some of these people and put names to faces, even for people that um, were more recent, because it was helping me sort of memorize who is who in my life. So I feel like a lot was not told to me by the doctors because it was MRSA, and MRSA in hospitals is a big bad thing. And so I feel like I was left in the dark a lot about what actually happened. And I ordered my charts and I went through it myself and I brought it to other doctors to look at and stuff like that. But they just weren't. I didn't feel like they were very straightforward with me. Um, After the doctors, the person I told was my now husband, who was we weren't married at the time, And we actually got married because of the difficulty that we had at the time of him being able to get in the room, because there was rules about you had to be family in order to go in the ICU, and we didn't ever want to go through that again. It was ridiculous. So I mean, it was his child, right? But he wasn't allowed in to see me. So, but he was the next person I told. And again, there was so much chaos, and everyone was really worried about me that I don't know how much people were listening to me. So, um, everyone was really focused on, because I was still obviously really sick. I still couldn't breathe on my own. Talking was basically taking the mask off and trying to talk and then saying, put the mask back on. And it wasn't, it wasn't like they didn't want my whole story. So
How long did it feel like you were there?
lifetimes felt like forever. It felt like forever, and sort of quick too. It was both. It really did feel, because every single one of the connections that I went through alone was like a lifetime of time. And we went through it in detail, and yeah, I was there for a really long time.
Did you feel like there was no time when you were there? Like a lot of people talk about a lack of time and
Yep.
space.
The time thing was freeing. It made sense. It one of the One of the things that's happened to me since I've been back and alive is I have a lot of dreams. I think I told you this. Sometimes the dreams are with relatives that have passed, and sometimes I have dreams with other beings, creatures. I don't know what they are. And they ask me to describe time, generational time. And it happens, I don't know, a couple of times a year since my near death experience. And basically, I will be having a dream, a very, very, very realistic dream. If it's a dream, I don't know. And this being will approach me. It'll be in that blue light that I see. And again, it doesn't say words. And it just asks me to describe the order of life. And it shows me a picture of my grandma, and it shows me a picture of me, and it thinks we're the same person. And I have to explain to it that before my grandma there was somebody else, and before her there was somebody else, and after my grandmother was my mother, and after my mother it was me, and we're all connected through blood, and we're all sort of one long blood creature, but we're all individual beings. And I have to explain that to these entities, whatever they are, like maybe a couple times a year. But that's I don't know if I've shared that one before, but that's like one of the weird things that's happened to me after I came to. And it's like I know how to describe it to them because I understand what it's like without that timeline and that thing where you can see all at once and not linear.
Before this experience, did you have any questions or concepts of what it would be like to die? And having done that, were any of those questions answered for you?
I lived in a house in the Adirondacks, and it was an old cure cottage, and it was like 8 rooms, and people would come from New York City and stay in this cure cottage to die, essentially. And I used to see things there that would make me question if there's something that happens after. Me and my brothers, I had 2 brothers, and as kids we would see people in the windows and things like that. There was 7 fireplaces in that house, and the charcoal from the fireplaces would be taken out and pictures would be drawn on the walls in the hallways. And my parents would always blame us, but we never touched the charcoal.
What sort of pictures did you see?
Tic-tac-toe boards.
Wow, they're really bored in the veil.
Yeah, little games and stuff. Sometimes smiley faces.
Were there
And
any direct communications, like with them trying to
no,
ask you
no
this?
words or anything like that. And when we would play outside in my brother's room, which sort of overlooked the front yard, we would always see a lady sort of watching us from the room, things like that. There was behind the kitchen, there was a room, and there was someone there that me and my brothers called the janitor. And he always had a tool belt on, and he would just sort of watch us and look annoyed and things like that. So just different different things
But only
happen.
you and your brother saw this, right?
Me and my brothers, yeah, we just my well, if my parents saw it, they never admitted it, but
Did you
I
ever
think
consider validating that, like going back and finding out if maybe somebody had passed and got stuck there or anything like that?
I well, I've been back to the house, just out of curiosity to go there. People have definitely died there because that's what it was built for. It was built for people to come and die in. It was built, I think, in 1850 something, and people would come from New York City because they got tuberculosis, and they would come die in the Adirondacks because it was pretty and easier to breathe. I don't have any names or anything. It is, I know it's a historic landmark now, that house, but uh, I don't have any research on the background of it. So,
No,
but
just
anyway, it caused me to question, life after death. That was my biggest experience and questioning, and the biggest thing that sort of affected my belief of what happens to you after you die.
what would you say is your biggest lesson learned on based on this experience or these two experiences?
Just to try to, I tell this to my kids too, to try to make every connection you make in life a positive connection that's going to be something beautiful, even if it's tiny. So even if you're on the street, don't plow through a crowd, try to think about how you're affecting people, and try to think about if you're making other people's life more difficult or a better life to live. Because ultimately, I want all those structures that I see at the end to be beautiful and not crumbling. So I want this magnificent city.
Julie, thank you so very much for being on here. I know that these things could put people in very vulnerable positions, and it's really personal. And the fact that you've come on here and shared this story with us, I could tell you myself and our viewers are super grateful. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I've never done anything like this. So,
I know, first time, yeah.
yeah.
Terrific job. It was really, really interesting, compelling, and I'm so grateful to you. It was really nice meeting you. Thank you so much again.